cousin mocked me at a family BBQ. Then a retired SEAL dropped his glass when I said my call sign. The champagne glass shattered before my cousin finished laughing. 1 second earlier, Nolan Price had been pointing his phone at my face, red from beer and barbecue heat, telling everyone in my aunt's backyard to get ready for the funniest thing they would see all summer. He had one arm hooked around the back of a patio chair like he owned the place. And with the other, he held his phone close enough that I could see my reflection trembling in the black glass. Behind him, my family was spread across Aunt Lorna's yard outside Waco, Texas, under the oak trees and string lights, eating brisket off paper plates and pretending they were not waiting for me to do something strange. "Come on, Mara," Nolan said into the phone, dragging my name out like a joke that had already made him laugh before anyone else heard it. "Tell the camera what they called you in the army. Every soldier had some scary nickname, right? Let me guess. Princess?" A few people laughed. Not everybody. I remember that now, because when a person survives by disappearing, she learns to notice the difference between a crowd and the people inside it. Aunt Lorna did not laugh. My cousin Beth looked down at her potato salad like she had suddenly discovered something interesting in it. Two teenagers near the cooler laughed because teenagers laugh when adults make it safe. Nolan laughed hardest of all. I was sitting with a glass of sweet tea in my right hand, my bad hand, the one with scar tissue that tightens in certain weather, and when men speak too loudly over silence. I could have walked away. I should have walked away. That had been the plan from the moment I agreed to come. Bring the peach cobbler, kiss my aunt on the cheek, stay 2 hours, leave before Nolan got drunk enough to remember that cruelty made him feel important. But something about the word princess reached into a place I had spent 20 years locking up. Maybe it was the phone. Maybe it was the way my family leaned in, hungry for a story they had never earned. Maybe it was the fact that the next day, although I did not know it yet, the man who had stolen my life would stand on a stage in Austin and receive an award for courage. So I looked straight into Nolan's phone camera and I said one word: Hades. The word did not come out loud. It did not need to. It landed cold and flat in the warm Texas air, cutting through the smell of smoke, beer, cut grass, and my aunt's honeysuckle along the fence. For one breath, nobody understood it. Nolan's grin stayed on his face, waiting for permission to turn the word into another joke. Then, across the patio, Elias Granger went pale. I had noticed Elias when he arrived because men like him do not enter rooms the way ordinary men do. He was 72, maybe a little older, with white hair cut short, a navy blazer that looked too formal for a backyard barbecue, and eyes that counted exits without asking permission. Aunt Lorna had introduced him as an old friend of her late husband Wade, a retired Navy SEAL who had moved back to Texas to be near his grandchildren. He had shaken my hand earlier and held it half a second too long, not because he was flirting, but because he recognized scars and did not know from where. When I said Hades, his champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the hardwood patio and exploded. Everyone froze. Country music kept playing from the old speakers by the back door for maybe 2 more seconds before somebody killed it. A little boy holding a red popsicle stopped mid-step. Aunt Lorna turned slowly, her birthday ribbon pinned crookedly to her yellow blouse. Nolan lowered the phone a fraction. Not all the way, because shame had not caught up with him yet. Elias stared at me as if I were standing in the doorway covered in sand and blood. "No," he whispered. Then he shook his head, and the color drained out of his face so completely that Beth reached toward him as if he might fall. "No, that's impossible." I set my sweet tea down on the patio table because my hand had begun to shake. Elias took one step toward me, then another. "You're dead," he said. My family looked from him to me, waiting for someone to laugh. No one did. He stopped in front of my chair. His mouth opened once before he found the discipline to close it. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was no longer the polite voice of a guest at a birthday barbecue. It was the voice of a man reporting to someone whose name had survived inside him longer than most prayers. Task Unit 7? He asked. I said nothing. Kandahar Extraction Corridor? I looked away. November Storm? That was the one that made me look back. Elias straightened. His old knees were stiff, and one of them had been rebuilt badly. But he locked his spine like pain was just another order he could refuse. Then, in front of my entire family, in front of Nolan's phone and Aunt Lorna's brisket table, and a yard full of people who thought I was the strange divorced woman who lived alone outside Temple, Texas, Elias Granger raised his hand to his forehead and saluted me. No one moved. Nolan finally lowered the phone. "What the hell is happening?" he asked. Elias did not look at him. His eyes stayed on mine, shining with something I did not want to receive, because it was too close to grief. "You have no idea," he said quietly, "who you just mocked." That was the moment my family realized they had not been laughing at a lonely old woman. They had been laughing at the pilot men used to pray for when they were already sure they were dead. And the worst part was, the man who buried the truth about me was being honored the very next night. I almost did not go to Aunt Lorna's barbecue in the first place. That is important because people like clean stories, and mine was never clean. People want to believe that the truth arrives because someone finally becomes brave. Sometimes the truth arrives because you are tired, because your aunt is turning 75, because you are lonely enough to answer the phone, and because the man who usually makes the worst joke gets drunk before sunset. My house sat outside Temple on a narrow road where the mailboxes leaned like old men, and the evening smelled of dust, mesquite, and cattle ponds when the wind came from the south. It was not much to look at. One story, faded white siding, an old pickup in the drive, 2 raised garden beds where my tomatoes fought the heat and usually lost by August. Inside, the rooms were clean and quiet. Too quiet, according to my sister, back when she still tried to call. No photographs of me in uniform hung on the walls, no folded flag, no shadow box, no medals. The only thing from before was a locked metal box in the back of my closet, beneath winter blankets I never used. I told myself I kept it because throwing it away would be disrespectful. That was not true. I kept it because some part of me knew that buried things are not the same as dead things. For nearly 8 years, I had skipped most family gatherings. Thanksgiving, Easter, graduations, baby showers, 4th of July cookouts. I always had a reason: a migraine, a bad back, a neighbor who needed help, too much traffic, too little sleep. People stopped believing the reasons long before they stopped accepting them. In my family, absence becomes a personality. By the time Aunt Lorna turned 75, I had become difficult, cold, antisocial, maybe unstable, definitely strange. A woman who had served in the army and never really came back right. They were not entirely wrong. That was what made it easier not to correct them. Correction requires trust. It requires explaining why certain sounds still pull your skin tight 20 years later, why you sit where you can see doors, why you cannot stand with your back to open space, why the smell of diesel and hot metal can make your stomach drop like an aircraft losing lift. Correction requires telling people stories that will either make them pity you or doubt you. I had no appetite for either. Before Kandahar, I had never been the kind of woman my family knew what to do with. That was part of the problem long before war gave them a cleaner excuse. I was not rebellious in the loud way. I did not slam doors or announce myself with bad decisions. I was quiet, stubborn, and far too observant for people who preferred their daughters and nieces cheerful. At family reunions, I noticed which couples smiled only when someone was watching. I noticed which uncles drank faster after phone calls. I noticed which cousins turned mean when they felt ignored. Children who notice too much make adults uncomfortable, so adults call them sensitive, moody, difficult, old souls. Anything except accurate. I joined the army because I wanted a life where competence mattered more than charm. That sounds noble if you say it right. But the truth is less polished. I wanted distance. I wanted structure. I wanted to prove that my body, my mind, and my fear could belong to me instead of to a room full of people deciding what kind of woman I was allowed to be. Flying came later, and when it did, it felt like discovering a language I had been born almost knowing. Helicopters are not graceful in the way planes are graceful. They are argument machines. They beat the air into submission and dare physics to object. I loved them for that. I loved that every flight demanded attention, humility, and nerve. You could not fake your way through weather. You could not flatter a rotor system. You either respected the machine and the mission, or you became a story told during safety briefings. My family never understood that version of me because I never translated it for them. To them, military service was uniforms at airports, yellow ribbons, folded flags in movies, and discount breakfasts on Veterans Day. They knew I had deployed, but deployment was an abstract word until it made me less available for birthdays. They knew I had flown, but flying meant either commercial pilots with crisp voices or crop dusters over fields. The space between those images and what I actually did was too wide, so they filled it with jokes. Mara is secretive. Mara thinks she's better than us. Mara probably sat behind a desk. Mara came back weird and never got over herself. Maybe I could have corrected them earlier. Maybe if I had told one sanitized story at Thanksgiving, one harmless anecdote about sand in my boots or army coffee. They would have built a gentler mythology around me. But every harmless story sat too close to one with teeth. If I told them about the time Dana taped a cartoon devil to my helmet, someone would ask why. If I told them Ben called me the only pilot he trusted to land in a broom closet, someone would ask where I had landed. If I told them Luis hummed when he was scared, I would hear him humming with blood on his sleeves. Silence became easier. Then it became habit. Then habit became identity. Graham used to say I could turn any room into a locked door. He said it gently at first. Later, he said it like an accusation. He was not wrong. But locked doors are not always meant to keep people out. Sometimes they keep the room from collapsing on everyone nearby. I wish he had understood that. I wish I had known how to explain it before resentment turned both of us into people who needed the other to be guilty. Then Aunt Lorna called. She did not open with guilt. That was her gift. My mother used guilt like a fork, poking until she found soft places. Lorna used honesty. Mara, she said, I'm turning 75. I know. You sending a card from your bunker again? My bunker has excellent stationery. She laughed, but softly. I don't need gifts, honey. I just want to see who's still willing to sit at my table. That was the sentence that got me. Not because it was dramatic, because it was not. Aunt Lorna had always understood that love, real love, does not kick down doors. It leaves a chair open. I'll come, I said before I could talk myself out of it. There was a pause on the line. You will? You asked. I did. Her voice changed, and I could hear that she was trying not to make too much of it. Bring that peach cobbler you make with the burned edges. They're caramelized. They're burned. I love them. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen with the phone still in my hand and felt the house around me, the heavy quiet I had spent years mistaking for peace. I told myself I would go. I would bring the cobbler. I would stay 2 hours. I would leave before Nolan got drunk. The first two promises were realistic. The third was prayer disguised as planning. The next afternoon, I baked the cobbler and let the edges darken the way Lorna liked. I put on jeans, a gray blouse, and boots with enough wear to make them honest. I stood in front of the mirror longer than I meant to, studying the woman looking back. 53 years old, brown hair threaded with gray and pinned at the nape of my neck, lines at the eyes, a mouth that had forgotten how to soften when people watched, scars on the right palm, partly hidden unless you knew how to look. No jewelry except my watch. For a moment, I thought of opening the closet box. I did not. Instead, I picked up the cobbler, locked the door behind me, and drove north. Aunt Lorna's house sat outside Waco at the end of a long drive lined with live oaks. Wade, her husband, had planted those trees when they first bought the property, back when everyone said he was foolish to waste water on shade he might not live long enough to enjoy. Wade said that was exactly the point of planting trees. You were supposed to make shade for people you might never sit beside. He had been dead for 6 years by then, but the oaks were still doing their job. Cars lined the gravel drive, new SUVs, pickup trucks polished like show animals, one motorcycle, and a rented bounce house in the side yard already sagging in the heat. The smell hit me before I reached the porch. Brisket smoke, charcoal, onions, beer, sun-warmed plastic tablecloths, and the faint sweetness of birthday cake icing. Kids ran between folding chairs with popsicles melting down their wrists. Men argued about football beside the smoker as if the outcome depended on volume. Women carried potato salad and deviled eggs from the kitchen, performing the sacred Southern ritual of complaining about how much food there was while adding more. I parked my old truck between my cousin Beth's Lexus and Nolan's oversized pickup, which had 2 flags, 3 bumper stickers, and the kind of lift kit that suggested his masculinity needed ground clearance. Nobody rushed over when I got out. A few people waved in the way people wave when they have already decided they will not cross the yard. Then, Aunt Lorna came down the porch steps. She was small, soft around the middle, with silver hair sprayed into obedience, and a yellow blouse that made her look like Summer had chosen a favorite aunt. She hugged me tightly, cobbler dish and all. "You came," she said. "You asked." She pulled back and looked at my face the way she always had, not staring at the scarred edges, but looking beneath them. That still counts for something in this family, you know. Depends who's keeping score. She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Come on, before Nolan sees you and starts performing." "Too late." "Well, look who came back from witness protection," Nolan shouted from near the grill. Several people laughed. It was the safe kind of laugh, the kind families use to keep one man from feeling embarrassed by his own volume. Nolan was already holding a beer, his face flushed, his brown hair thinning at the temples under a baseball cap from the RV dealership where he worked outside Dallas. He had been handsome once, in the loud way boys are handsome before they learn that charm is not character. At 49, he had thickened around the waist and sharpened around the tongue. I set the cobbler on the dessert table. "You still selling campers to people who can't back them into driveways?" That got a better laugh than his line. I knew it would, and I regretted it as soon as I said it. Nolan's smile held, but his eyes tightened. Men like him do not enjoy being laughed with if someone else is holding the match. "Careful," he said. "I'll put you in one at a family discount. You could drive around the country avoiding us in style." "I already avoid you for free." Beth snorted into her drink. Aunt Lorna gave me a warning look that said she appreciated the accuracy but not the timing. I gave Nolan the smallest smile and walked toward the patio. For a while, it was manageable. That is how these things start. Not with lightning, with small clouds you tell yourself will pass. I kissed cousins on cheeks. I answered questions about my garden. I admired pictures of children whose names I had to retrieve from the family tree in my head. I let Aunt Lorna pile brisket on a plate and ignored the part of me that counted exits, sightlines, sharp objects, and the distance from the patio to the open yard. Then Elias Granger arrived. A black SUV pulled into the drive a little before 5. The man who stepped out moved carefully but not weakly. White hair, navy blazer, polished shoes that did not belong in the grass, old injury in the left knee, eyes that scanned the yard, the porch, the tree line, the street beyond the open gate. I saw him see everything. I also saw him pretend he had not. Aunt Lorna brightened in a way that hurt to watch. Grief changes shape, but it does not leave the room. "Elias!" she called. He kissed her cheek and handed her a bottle wrapped in gold tissue. "Happy birthday, Lorna." Wade would say I was late. Wade was late to his own wedding, only because he was helping a man change a tire, only because he took the wrong road first. They laughed, and for a moment I could see the outline of my uncle in the space between them. Wade had been my aunt's husband, my mother's brother, and one of the few men in my family who asked questions only after making sure you had eaten. He had served in Vietnam, though he spoke of it rarely. He had tried to talk to me several times after I came home from Kandahar. I always found a reason to leave before he could get close enough. Aunt Lorna brought Elias over. "Mara, this is Elias Granger, old friend of Wade's. Elias, this is my niece Mara." He offered his hand. His grip was firm, dry, practiced. Then his thumb brushed the edge of the burn scar across my palm, and his eyes flicked down for less than a second. "Pleasure," he said. "You too?" His gaze lingered on my face, not rudely, carefully. "You served?" "Army." He nodded once. "Figured. Most people say thank you for your service because silence makes them uncomfortable." Elias did not. I appreciated that. "What gave it away?" I asked. "The way you picked the chair with the wall behind it." I looked at him. "Maybe I like shade." "Maybe." That was all. He let it go. But throughout the next hour, I felt him notice things. The way I flinched when the propane grill popped. The way I watched the children running too close to the street. The way my hand tightened when Nolan's voice rose. The way I looked away from the American flag when the wind snapped it hard against the pole. Nolan noticed Elias too, but only as an audience. The older man's presence made him louder. He talked about his dealership, about sales numbers, about how people were soft now, about how his high school football coach would have fixed half the country by making everyone run bleachers. He drank beer, then another, then one from the cooler he said did not count because it was light. By 6, the sun had lowered enough to turn the yard gold. This is when family gatherings become dangerous. People are full, warm, and bored. Children have sugar in their blood. Adults have alcohol in theirs. Old resentments start looking for entertainment. Nolan found me near the patio table, where I was trying to decide whether 2 hours had passed if I had spent half of them wishing I were gone. "Mara was Army, right?" he said loudly. I could feel the group shift before I looked up. Nolan had gathered 3 cousins, 2 in-laws, and a nephew home from college who had not yet learned that listening can make you guilty. "Yes," Beth said cautiously. She was. "Doing what, though?" Nolan asked. "Nobody ever knows. Probably filing forms in an air-conditioned office." I sipped my tea. He grinned. "What, no denial?" "I'm trying to remember if air-conditioned offices existed where I was." A cousin laughed. Nolan pointed his beer bottle toward me. "You ever do anything dangerous?" "Sometimes." "That means no." "That means sometimes." Another laugh. Nolan's cheeks flushed darker. "You shoot guns? Jump out of planes? Wrestle terrorists?" "Not usually in that order." That one got Aunt Lorna to cover her mouth. Nolan took the laugh as a challenge. He stepped closer, leaning into the performance. See, this is what I mean. She gives these mysterious little answers, like she's in a spy movie. Come on, Mara, give us a real story. I don't tell war stories at birthday parties. Oh, war stories now? He widened his eyes at the crowd. Listen to that. She says war stories. I thought it was paperwork. It was paperwork, too. The Army loves paperwork. A few people chuckled, but the air had changed. I felt Aunt Lorna watching from the porch. I could have stood. I could have left. Instead, I stayed. Because leaving would have made the scene bigger, and I had spent 20 years choosing the smaller wound. Nolan tilted his head. Maybe if you had some cool war stories, Graham would have stuck around. The yard went quiet in pieces. First Beth, then the nephew, then the two in-laws who knew enough to look down. Aunt Lorna's voice came sharp from behind him. Nolan. He lifted one hand. What? I'm joking. That is the coward's favorite shield. I was joking. I did not mean it. Why are you so sensitive? A joke is supposed to make the target smaller and the speaker untouchable. My hand tightened around the glass so hard the ice clicked. Graham had been gone 18 years, long enough that people said his name with the careless confidence of those who think old wounds cannot hear. He had left with 2 suitcases, a tired face, and a sentence that still lived inside my ribs. I don't know how to stay married to a stranger. I had not corrected Nolan because correction would have meant telling him that my marriage did not die because I lacked stories. It died because another man wrote one about me and my husband believed it. Nolan, Aunt Lorna said again. He rolled his eyes, embarrassed now and therefore more dangerous. Fine, fine. Nobody can say anything anymore. He walked away, and for a few minutes, I thought the worst had passed. I should have known better. The birthday cake came out around 7. We sang. Aunt Lorna cried. People clapped. The sky turned lavender beyond the oaks. Someone poured champagne into plastic flutes because Lorna liked pretending barbecue could be fancy if you added bubbles. Elias took one glass and stood near the patio rail, not far from the back door. I noticed that he had not had much to drink. Men like him rarely did in strange places. I was thinking of leaving when Nolan came back with his phone already out. Everybody, he said, we need to settle something. Nolan, don't, Beth said. But the phone was up, camera pointed at me. He had found that particular drunk confidence that mistakes attention for permission. Aunt Mara is finally going to tell us what she really did in the Army. Put the phone down, I said. Oh, come on, family group chat deserves the truth. I said put it down. He made a face at the camera. See? Classified. Very important. Top secret potato peeler. A cousin near the cooler said, maybe her call sign was spreadsheet. Another said, Grandma Commando. Nolan grinned like they had handed him rope, and he knew exactly where to tie it. Come on, he said. What was your big scary nickname? Every soldier has one, right? My pulse was steady. That was the strange thing. I was not angry yet, not in the way people think anger works. I felt distant, like I had stepped 2 feet behind my own face. Nolan, Aunt Lorna said, moving toward us. He waved her off without looking. Let me guess. They called you princess. There are moments when silence is dignity. There are other moments when silence becomes participation in your own erasure. For 20 years, I had not always known the difference. That night, with his phone in my face and my family waiting to see whether I would shrink, I finally did. I looked into the camera. Hades. Then the glass shattered. After Elias saluted me, the backyard became a courtroom without a judge. People gathered closer in a slow, uncertain circle, the way humans gather around an accident even when they are afraid to see blood. Nolan's phone hung loose in his hand, still recording until Beth reached over and pressed the screen dark. Kids were sent inside. though most of them hovered by windows. Someone swept up the champagne glass and left the broken pieces in a little glittering pile by the patio steps because no one knew where to put them. I hated every second of it. Attention is a kind of weather. Some people lift their faces to it. I had lived too long in storms. My skin prickled under the eyes of cousins, nephews, spouses, and people who had married into the family without realizing the Whitakers treated other people's pain as communal property once it became interesting. It was a long time ago, I said. Elias lowered his salute slowly. His hand trembled once before he forced it still. Not to the men who came home because of you. Nolan swallowed. Okay, so what? She was some kind of pilot? Elias turned then, and the coldness in his stare made Nolan take a step back. Not some kind. The words landed harder than a shout. Aunt Lorna came to my side. Mara, sweetheart, what is he talking about? I flew medical support, I said. Elias looked at me with something almost like frustration. She flew black zone extraction. That makes it sound cleaner than it was. It was never clean. Nobody understood the phrase, but they understood his tone. I watched my family begin rearranging me in their minds. The quiet niece, the divorced cousin, the woman with no children, no medals, no stories. The one who left early, the one who flinched at fireworks, the one they called cold because cold was easier than wounded. Nolan tried again, weaker this time. What does Hades even mean? Elias looked around at them, and I could see him decide how much civilians could hold. Call signs are usually jokes, he said. You get them from mistakes, bad habits, embarrassing stories. Some young pilot gets lost taxiing, and they call him Compass for the rest of his career. Somebody spills coffee on a general, he becomes Starbucks. Dark humor keeps people alive. He paused. But some names stop being jokes. Some names become warnings. Some become prayers. He looked at me. Hades was both. I closed my eyes. Elias? He softened his voice, but did not stop. When men were trapped so deep in hell that command had already written them off, she was the one who came back. The yard went very still. Aunt Lorna put her hand over her mouth. Kandahar? She whispered. I looked at her. Wade had told her something then. Maybe not much. Maybe only enough to leave a shadow. Elias heard the name and nodded. November 2003. The year moved through me like a blade. Not because I had forgotten it, because other people were saying it out loud. It was a recon element, Elias said. Ambushed outside the extraction corridor. Storm came in early. Visibility went to nothing. Command ordered air support to pull back. Multiple birds turned around. Nolan's mouth opened, but no words came out. Mara went in anyway, Elias said. 31 men got pulled out of that basin because Hades ignored an order no decent officer should have given. So she disobeyed orders, Nolan said, grabbing at the only piece that sounded like criticism. Yes, I said. The honesty startled everyone. I looked at him. They were still alive. That shut him up. Aunt Lorna touched my arm. If you saved them, why didn't anyone know? There it was. The question people think is simple because they have never watched truth lose to paperwork. Because the report said something else. Elias's jaw tightened. What did it say? Beth asked. I looked at the yard, at the birthday decorations swaying gently in the evening breeze, at the paper plates sagging under the ribs and coleslaw, at my aunt's 75 years of life gathered under string lights. That part does not belong at your birthday party. Aunt Lorna's eyes filled, but her voice remained steady. If it belongs to you, then maybe it belongs somewhere other than inside your chest. I had no answer for that. For a minute, no one spoke. Then Elias asked, Have you seen the Austin event announcement? No. Nolan, desperate to be useful now that cruelty had failed him, cleared his throat. What event? Elias did not look away from me. Veterans Memorial Center, tomorrow night. Nolan frowned. Wait, the fundraiser? My dealership sponsored a table. He pulled out his phone, clumsy with nerves. There's some general getting an award, Kandahar something. I felt the air change before he said the name. He scrolled, tapped, and held up the screen. A smiling man in a dark suit looked back at us. Silver hair, American flag pin. The polished confidence of someone who had spent 20 years being applauded for a story he wrote in other men's blood. Nolan read, his voice slowing with each word. General Preston Hale to receive the Kandahar Legacy Award for courageous leadership during Operation Iron Lantern. For a moment, I could not hear the yard. I could only hear static. Aunt Lorna whispered, "Mara?" "Of course," I said. Elias's face had gone hard enough to frighten even me. "That man," he said, "did not lead Kandahar. He ran from it." I walked away then. Not dramatically. I simply stood, crossed the patio, stepped down into the side yard, and kept walking until the voices blurred behind me. I stopped by the fence where Wade's oak trees threw long shadows over the grass. Beyond the property line, open pasture stretched toward the road. A hot wind moved through the weeds. I had spent 20 years building walls inside myself, but the problem with walls is that they can be breached from either side. Elias had cracked one from the outside. Hale's face had done the rest. Aunt Lorna followed me a minute later. She did not touch me right away. "I never knew," she said. "You were not supposed to." "That sounds like something you were told." "It was something I learned." She stood beside me, looking out at the pasture. "Wade suspected you were framed." My throat tightened. "Wade suspected a lot of things. He tried to talk to you." "I know. You always left." "I know that too." She folded her arms. "Was Hale the reason?" I laughed once, without humor. Hale was the reason the army turned its back. "And Graham?" I did not answer. She looked at me then. "Honey, Hale was not the only thing I lost." Behind us, the party remained silent in that unnatural way that is louder than noise. I knew people were whispering. I knew Nolan was replaying his own video, seeing things he had missed while he was busy being funny. My hand trembling, Elias in the background turning pale. The way my face did not change when he said Graham's name because I had trained it not to. A few minutes later, Elias came to the fence. Aunt Lorna looked between us, then squeezed my shoulder and went back toward the house. Elias stood a respectful distance away. "I heard you died." Some days that rumor was close enough. He flinched like I had struck him. "I looked," he said. "After I heard stories, not enough. I know that now. But I asked around." "You did not owe me anything." His eyes sharpened. "Yes, we did." I looked at him then. He swallowed. "You saved men who got to go home, but none of us came back for you." The words hit harder than I expected because they were not accusation. They were confession. For years, I had told myself that being abandoned was proof I had deserved it. Hearing him name it as a debt unsettled something deep in me. "I was not looking to be found," I said. "People who are drowning rarely are." I shook my head. "Do not turn me into a mission, Elias." "I'm trying not to. Try harder." He accepted that with a nod. Good men know when a wound is not an invitation. After a moment, he said, "Hale is taking that award tomorrow." "I am not going. If he takes it, his lie becomes history. History has been lying about me for 20 years. Then maybe 20 years is long enough." I wanted to tell him that justice was a young person's word. That after enough time passes, the truth stops feeling like rescue and starts feeling like excavation. You dig it up and all you find are bones. But I did not say that. I only looked back at Aunt Lorna's house, at the family gathered in awkward silence, at Nolan standing by the grill staring down at his phone like it had accused him. Then I went home. The drive back to Temple felt longer than it was. The sky went black while I was still on the county road, and every set of headlights in my rearview mirror stayed too long. When I reached my house, I sat in the truck with both hands on the wheel until the engine ticked itself quiet. Inside, the house smelled of dust, coffee grounds, and old wood. Peaceful, lonely, both things can be true. I walked to the bedroom closet and pulled out the metal box. The lock was stiff. My fingers remembered the combination before my mind admitted it. Inside lay the things I had not been able to throw away: a burned shoulder patch, a cracked flight badge, a folded mission map stained at one corner, a dog tag that did not belong to me, an envelope from the Department of the Army that contained the denial letter I had read once and never again, and, beneath all of it, a sealed envelope in Wade's handwriting. For Mara, when she is ready to stop carrying it alone. I touched the envelope but did not open it. Not yet. Instead, I picked up the dog tag. My thumb moved over the name the way it had 1,000 times. Owen Callahan. I closed my hand around it, and the old lie returned. Not Hale's lie, but mine. The one I had told myself, because guilt needs shape. I did not save everyone, I whispered. The night before Austin, I did not sleep. Sleep has never been a thing I do by surrender. It comes when it wants, stays lightly, and leaves at the smallest sound. That night, it did not come at all. I sat on the back porch with the metal box open on the table beside me, while crickets sawed through the dark like radio static. Somewhere far off, a helicopter passed over Temple, probably medical, maybe training, maybe nothing important. My body did not care. My right hand clenched around the chair arm until the scar tissue pulled tight and hot. There are sounds the body files differently. A car backfiring is not a car. It is a muzzle flash in memory. Fireworks are not celebration. They are incoming until proven otherwise. A distant rotor is not transportation. It is lift, weight, wind, risk, and a question you never stop hearing. Can we get them out? The first thing people misunderstand about combat stories is that they think the worst moments arrive as clear pictures. They do not. They come back as pieces. Smell first. Burned hydraulic fluid, hot dust, blood with metal in it. Then sound, static, alarms, someone praying because he thinks the channel is dead. Then touch, grit between teeth, harness straps cutting into shoulder, sweat under gloves, a lip bitten open during a hard landing. Operation Iron Lantern had not been supposed to become legend. That is the other thing people misunderstand. Disaster rarely enters wearing its real name. It comes dressed as routine. Kandahar region, November 2003. I was younger then, though not as young as I looked in the photographs I later hid. 33 years old, Army helicopter pilot, tired in the bones but sharp where it mattered. My crew had flown enough with me to know I did not dramatize danger. If I said we were fine, we were usually not fine, but not dead yet. If I went quiet, they listened harder. Crew Chief Ben Arlen had hands like fence posts and the gentle patience of a man who could fix nearly anything with wire, curses, and prayer. He called me ma'am when other people were listening and Mara when bullets were not. Medic Luis Ortega was 28, from New Mexico, with a wife who sent him drawings from their little girl and a habit of humming old ranchera songs while packing trauma kits. My co-pilot, Dana Cross, was the youngest of us, brilliant and sharp-tongued, with eyes that could read instruments in turbulence the way some people read menus. The mission was supposed to be simple: insert and extract a small recon element supporting a broader sweep. Pre-dawn movement, limited exposure. Weather window predicted to hold. Command oversight from a temporary operations center where then-Colonel Preston Hale had recently arrived with clean boots, polished confidence, and a reputation for making superiors feel that their decisions had been his idea all along. Hale was not incompetent in the obvious ways. That mattered later. Obvious fools get stopped early. Dangerous men learn the language of competence. Hale spoke in measured phrases. He used words like assets, parameters, risk envelope, tactical patience. He sounded calm until the world demanded something braver than calm. The weather turned before first light. At first, it was only a warning in the distance, a brown smudge swallowing the lower stars. Sandstorms in that part of Afghanistan could move like living walls. Forecasts were guesses wearing uniforms. By the time the recon element called contact near the East Ridge, visibility had already begun to collapse. The radio came alive in fragments. Contact East Ridge. 2 down. The extraction point compromised. Taking fire from the south. Need air now. Then static ate half the words. We were already spinning up. Ben moved through the cabin, checking straps and equipment with a speed that looked like anger. Louise secured med bags and stretchers, jaw tight. Dana's gloved fingers danced over instruments. "Storm's early," she said. "Storm did not read the forecast," I said. She gave me a quick grin. "Rude of it." The first burst of small arms fire reported from the ground sounded distant over the radio, but voices carry truth better than maps. Those men were not in trouble. They were in a closing fist. Hale's voice came over command calm at first. "All elements, maintain tactical discipline. We are evaluating extraction viability." Evaluating. Viability. Words that can be useful in planning and fatal in rescue. A young voice broke through static. "We have wounded. Repeat. Wounded. Need evac. We are still mobile but pinned." I keyed the mic. "Command, this is Dustoff 3-1. We are green for launch." Hale answered. "Stand by." Dana looked at me. I said nothing. Another aircraft reported visibility dropping below safe approach. Another pilot asked for updated coordinates. Ground fire intensified. The recon team was being squeezed from ridge and wadi, with enemy fighters anticipating the planned extraction route. The storm did not hide them equally. It blinded us more than it blinded men who knew the ground. Then came the voice I would hear for 20 years. It was young. Too young. Though they all sound young once you get older. "If anybody can hear this," he said, breath hitching, "tell my mom I tried." Louise stopped humming. The channel erupted with overlapping transmissions. Someone cursed. Someone shouted for morphine. Someone called a grid coordinate and then corrected it. A second voice yelled that the landing zone was hot. Another said they had men they could not move. Hale cut across them all. "All air assets, abort approach, preserve aircraft, pull back until visibility improves." The words entered my headset with perfect clarity. Dana looked at me again. Ben froze in the cabin doorway. I keyed the mic. "Command Dustoff 3-1. Do we have confirmation the ground team is dead?" Silence. I repeated, "Do we have confirmation?" Hale's voice sharpened. "Whitaker, you have your order. Do we have confirmation they are dead?" Negative confirmation is not operational clearance. That sentence should have been engraved on every plaque they later gave him. It contained the whole man. Another pilot pulled back, then another. I do not blame them the way people think I should. Orders are not suggestions in a combat zone, and weather does not care about courage. Men and women who turned away that day did what they were told by someone who had authority to tell them. Hale carried that authority. That was why his failure mattered. I looked at my crew. "I will not order you into this," I said. Ben's laugh came over the internal comm, short and humorless. "Ma'am, you already know we're going," Louise said. "I packed extra blood for a reason." Dana adjusted her grip on the controls. "Then let's go get them before command finds a longer way to say abandon." That was the moment. Not heroic, not cinematic from the inside, just 4 people in a damaged world choosing the consequences they could live with. I turned the aircraft toward the storm. Command lit up immediately. "Dustoff 3-1, confirm heading?" I did not answer. "Whitaker, you are ordered to hold." The sand wall swallowed the horizon. I keyed the mic only once. "Hades inbound." The trapped men heard it. I know because the radio, for one miraculous second, cleared enough for a voice to say, "Hades is coming." People later asked why they called me that. Some said it was because I was cold. Some said it was because I flew into places other people avoided. Some said it came from an old training accident when I brought a bird down through smoke so thick, the crew chief said it felt like descending into the underworld. All of those stories held pieces. None held the center. Hades was not death. Hades was the place everyone feared entering and the name they called when someone needed to walk back out. Flying blind is not like closing your eyes. It is worse. Your eyes remain open, starving for information they cannot trust. Sand erased depth. Rotor wash threw the world back at us in violent sheets. Instruments became scripture. Dana read altitude and drift with a flashlight clipped under her chin after one panel flickered. Warning alarms layered themselves over radio static. Something hit the fuselage with a crack that made Luis curse. Ben shouted damage from the cabin. Hydraulic pressure dropping. How bad? I asked. Bad enough to mention, not bad enough to die. Appreciate the precision. Gunfire stitched up from below. Tracers and sand look wrong, like someone has scratched light into a wall. Dana called out distance. I corrected for wind that kept changing direction because the basin turned weather into a fist. The landing zone was not a zone. It was a suggestion made by desperate men under fire. Visual? Dana asked. No. Comforting? Keep reading. The ground came up harder than expected. We hit once, bounced, slammed down crooked, and my teeth cut through my lower lip. Pain flashed bright and disappeared under workload. Down, Ben shouted. Door! The cabin opened into hell. Sand and gunfire came in together. Luis was already moving. Ben leaned into the door with his weapon and his whole body, yelling to shapes I could barely see. Men emerged out of brown darkness carrying other men. Some walked, some crawled. Some were dragged by straps, belts, whatever hands could hold. The first wounded came aboard with blood pumping from his thigh. Luis dropped beside him. Tourniquet! Tourniquet! A SEAL with a chest wound tried to refuse help until Ben shoved him down hard enough to insult his ancestors. A young soldier came in carrying a man bigger than himself, then collapsed across the cabin floor because he had been bleeding under his body armor the whole time. Someone outside screamed that one more man was still out there. I should not have left the seat. Pilots are told this for good reason. Aircraft do not care about noble intentions, but rules written for ordinary danger can become obscene in extraordinary moments. I saw a man fall just short of the ramp, hands clawing at sand, and something in me moved before doctrine could stop it. Dana, hold her. Mara, hold her. I unstrapped, stepped out into rotor wash and grit, and grabbed the fallen man under his vest. He screamed. I screamed back, not words, just force. Ben reached from the ramp. Together, we hauled him in. Later, Hale's report would call that reckless abandonment of pilot position. It would say my action increased risk to aircraft and crew. It would not mention that the man lived. Then I saw Owen Callahan. I did not know his name then. I knew only that he was young, blonde under all that dust and blood, and his right leg was ruined below the knee. Two men dragged him toward us. An explosion hit close enough to turn the world white. The ramp bucked. The men pulling him went down. Owen slid sideways into sand and disappeared behind the violent brown curtain. I've got one down, Ben shouted. I see him, I yelled. But I did not clearly. That was the horror of it. I saw where he had been. I saw what the storm took. I moved toward the ramp, but Ben caught my harness and shoved me back so hard I hit the cockpit frame. We're taking too much fire. Owen, I screamed, though I did not know his name. Where is he? Mara, Dana shouted. We lose lift. We lose everybody. There are decisions that are not decisions. There is only math performed by terror. An aircraft overloaded with wounded, enemy fire closing, hydraulic pressure dropping, visibility failing. A man lost in sand. 30 men aboard who would die if we stayed. I got back in the seat. For 20 years, that moment was the room I returned to every night. I did not know that another soldier, half blind and bleeding, had dragged Owen through the opposite side in the chaos. I did not know he was under a pile of bodies and blankets while Luis worked over him. I did not know he would wake days later missing a leg, but alive. All I knew was the sand swallowing him while I lifted off. The takeoff should not have worked. We were too heavy, too damaged, too blind. The aircraft shuddered like an animal refusing the bit. Dana was bleeding from a cut along her hairline where something had struck the side window. Ben had taken fragments in his shoulder. Luis was doing chest compressions on the floor with one knee braced against a crate of supplies, counting under his breath. Men groaned, prayed, cursed, called for mothers and wives. One asked if we were dead. Another laughed and said if this was hell, the ride service had improved. Hale demanded casualty counts. Dust off 3-1, identify status, confirm status. I did not answer. Whitaker, report. I kept my hands on the controls and flew. A near miss rocked us so hard the cabin erupted. Dana read numbers. I followed them. The storm loosened its grip, one brutal foot at a time. When the base lights finally appeared through the murk, I felt no triumph, only disbelief. We came in hard, too hard. The landing gear took it with a scream of metal. Medical teams rushed us before the rotors fully wound down. Bodies moved, hands reached. Men were carried, dragged, lifted, counted. I unstrapped and stumbled into the chaos, mouth full of blood from my bitten lip, hands slick with hydraulic fluid and someone else's life. Where's the Marine with the leg? I kept asking. Did we get him? Did we get him? No one answered clearly. People told me to sit down. Someone tried to check my pupils. Someone else said my name like I was far away. Then Hale appeared. He was clean. That is what I remember first. Not perfectly clean. No one was perfectly clean there, but clean compared to the rest of us. His helmet tucked under one arm, his face tight, his eyes not on the wounded but on the aircraft. You disobeyed a direct order, he said. I stared at him, not understanding at first. They were alive. You disobeyed a direct order. 31 are out. At what cost? I looked around at the medics, the wounded, the blood trails, the bent aircraft. Ask them. He stepped closer, voice lowering. You think this ends because you landed? That was when I saw fear behind his anger. Not fear of the enemy, fear of me. Fear of what my success revealed about his order. The cover-up did not begin with a dramatic meeting. It began with language. Language is where cowardice goes to shower. Unauthorized action. Reckless disregard. Failure to maintain command discipline. Emotional decision-making under combat stress. Temporary tactical repositioning. Unresolved questions regarding judgment. Words arranged like sandbags around one simple truth. Hale ordered aircraft away while men were still alive. I expected an investigation into why command had called off the rescue. Instead, the investigation turned toward me. My disobedience was real, so it became the hook on which they hung every lie. Yes, I had violated an order. Yes, I had left the pilot seat. Yes, the aircraft had taken damage. Yes, not everyone survived. They used truths as nails and built a false house. Hale called me into a temporary office 2 days later. I had not slept more than an hour at a time. My lip was swollen. My palm was bandaged from burns I did not remember getting. He stood behind a desk with papers arranged in front of him, like a man conducting business, not burial. You may think truth protects you, he said. I said nothing. It does not. Truth belongs to whoever signs the report. I remember thinking that sounded rehearsed. Not because he had planned those exact words, but because men like Hale practice the shape of power long before they need to use it. My crew was pressured. Ben was told his career would end if he contradicted command. Dana was questioned while medicated, her answers interpreted through the fog of injury. Luis was transferred before his full statement could circulate. Communications logs were sealed for review. Captain Elise Monroe, the communications officer, was ordered to sign an altered timeline showing Hale's withdrawal order after presumed loss of viable contact. She was 26, ambitious, frightened, and alone in a room with men who knew exactly how to make her future feel fragile. She signed. A valor recommendation was drafted anyway. I did not know until later. Someone with more conscience than caution wrote that Chief Warrant Officer Mara Whitaker displayed extraordinary courage under impossible conditions, knowingly risking aircraft and life to extract wounded personnel under hostile fire and catastrophic weather. Hale blocked it. His note read, "Recommendation denied due to reckless disregard for command structure and unresolved questions regarding judgment under stress." Judgment under stress. I carried that phrase for years like a brand. The official process that followed Kandahar had the same smell as every administrative building I have ever hated. Burned coffee, copy paper, old carpet, and men pretending that rooms without windows make facts easier to manage. They called it an inquiry first, then a review, then a command assessment. The name changed whenever someone wanted it to sound less like judgment and more like procedure. I sat through interviews with a bandaged hand and a face that would not arrange itself into the shape they wanted. Calm looked evasive to them. Anger looked unstable. Tears would have looked manipulative. There was no correct way to be a woman accused by a man with rank. One major asked me whether I had a history of impulsive behavior. I asked him whether he had a history of leaving wounded men behind. That answer did not help me. Another officer wanted to know why I had not waited for updated weather clearance. I said because weather clearance does not bleed. A psychologist with kind eyes and a clipboard asked whether I felt responsible for casualties. I said yes, because only a monster could carry people through fire and feel nothing. Hale's people later quoted only the first part. I felt responsible. They removed the humanity and left the confession. Ben tried to speak for me. I found out later that he had submitted a statement saying every member of the crew understood the risk and supported the decision to go in. The statement disappeared into review channels, then returned with requests for clarification that turned courage into liability. Had he felt pressured by my authority? Had he feared retaliation if he refused? Had my reputation for aggressive flying created a climate in which subordinates felt unable to object? Ben wrote in the margin of one draft, "This is horseshit." That version did not make it into the file. Dana had a concussion and shrapnel cuts. They interviewed her in a medical tent under fluorescent light while she was still asking the same 3 questions every hour. She told them, according to the partial notes I saw years later, that I made the only decision available to a human being. The typed summary read, CW2, Cross expressed emotional loyalty to CW4. Whitaker and may not be able to assess command judgment objectively due to injury and stress. Luis's statement was shorter because he was transferred before anyone with power could hear him say the words he later mailed to me on a postcard with no return address. You did right. I am sorry they are making right look wrong. Elise Monroe was the one I blamed longest because her signature sat on the altered timeline. I did not know what pressure looked like from her side. I did not know Hale's deputy had placed 2 versions of the log in front of her and said one protected operational integrity while the other exposed everyone to scandal and prosecution. I did not know she had a younger brother in college whose tuition depended on her career continuing. None of that made the signature harmless, but it made it human. It took me 20 years to understand that Hale's genius was not forcing everyone to lie in the same way. It was giving each person a private reason to surrender a small piece of truth until the whole thing disappeared. By the time I came home, the story had already traveled ahead of me wearing official shoes. My family did not know details, but they breathed in the smoke. Graham breathed it deepest. He would ask me what happened, and I would see not a husband looking for my hand, but a jury waiting to see whether the defendant contradicted the file. That was unfair to him sometimes. Other times it was exactly right. Trauma made me suspicious. The lie made suspicion necessary. Between those two things, love had very little room to stand. When I returned home, Graham tried. I need to say that because anger is easier when people are simple. Graham Reeves was not evil. He was kind when kindness cost little and weaker than either of us understood when it cost much. He met me at the airport with flowers I could not smell because all I smelled was jet fuel and antiseptic. He held me carefully because I flinched when touched from behind. He made soup. He learned not to wake me too quickly. For a few weeks, I thought maybe love could translate what I could not say. Then the official story reached him, not all at once. That would have been easier to fight. It came in fragments through people he trusted. A friend of a friend still serving, a retired officer from Hale Circle, a chaplain who thought he was helping. They told him I had disobeyed orders and men had died. They told him I refused accountability. They told him trauma had made me unstable. They told him I was hiding behind silence because I could not face what I had done. Graham began looking at me differently. At first, I thought I imagined it. Then I saw the way his eyes moved to my hands when they shook, the way he stopped asking questions and started waiting for answers I could not give, the way he spoke to doctors in low voices, the way he removed the framed wedding photo from the hallway after I threw a mug during a nightmare and shattered the glass beneath it. One night, 6 months after I came home, he stood in the kitchen while rain hit the windows and said, "I don't know what happened over there, Mara. I only know you won't tell me the truth." I can't. That is not the same as won't. It is from where I'm standing. He rubbed both hands over his face. He looked exhausted. I wanted to comfort him, but I did not know how to cross the space between us without bringing the whole war with me. He said, "They said you made a decision and people died because of it." The words took the air out of the room. Who said that? It does not matter. It matters to me. You never answer anything, Mara. You just stand there and bleed silence all over the house. I save people. Then why does everyone act like you're guilty? That was the question. The one that broke something beyond repair, because it meant he had already chosen the crowd over the woman in front of him. I can't do this, I said. Neither can I. He packed 2 suitcases 3 days later. At the door, he looked back at me with tears in his eyes and said, "I don't know how to stay married to a stranger." I wanted to tell him I was not a stranger. I was a survivor standing behind a locked door, begging him to believe there was a reason I could not open it. But I was tired. Tired from war. Tired from hearings. Tired from men with clean hands calling me reckless. Tired from waking up with Owen Callahan's dog tag in my fist because it had been returned among the recovered gear and no one could tell me where he was buried. So I said nothing. After Graham left, I disappeared properly. Not all at once. Disappearing is an art of small refusals. Stop attending reunions. Stop returning calls quickly. Move outside temple where neighbors wave but do not ask much. Learn which grocery store is quietest at which hour. Take down photographs. Put uniforms in storage. Keep the metal box locked. Become the kind of woman families describe in lowered voices. She served, you know. Something happened. She does not like to talk about it. For 20 years, I thought the war took my marriage, my name, and my peace. But it was not the war. It was Preston Hale. The morning after the barbecue, my phone looked like a crime scene. Family group chat messages stacked on top of one another. Someone had posted Nolan's video, then deleted it. Then someone else had saved a version and reposted only the first part. The part where he called me princess and everyone laughed before Elias dropped the glass. Crop truth is just another kind of lie. Hope you're okay. Nolan was just drunk. What was that about? Were you really called Hades? Sorry, things got weird. Things got weird. I stared at that one for a long time. It was such a family phrase. Things got weird, as if weirdness had wandered into the yard on its own and started humiliating women with phone cameras. I ignored every message. Elias called at 8:13. You going tonight? He asked. No. You saw the flyer. I saw enough. He is receiving an award for the mission he abandoned. I closed my eyes. You said that. I am saying it again because it is obscene. Lots of obscene things happen in rooms with chandeliers. Mara. The way he said my name made me tired, not angry. Tired. People think the truth gives you energy. Sometimes it drains what little you have left. I am not walking into a room full of donors and politicians to argue with a decorated general about a sealed report from 20 years ago. You would not be alone. That does not mean I would be safe. He was quiet. To his credit, he did not argue with that. After we hung up, I made coffee and forgot to drink it. Around 10, Aunt Lorna pulled into my driveway in Wade's old blue sedan, the one she refused to sell because it still smelled faintly like his pipe tobacco, even though he had stopped smoking 10 years before he died. She came to the door carrying a paper bag and an envelope. I brought kolaches, she said. I'm not hungry. I know. They're mostly for me. I let her in. She sat at my kitchen table, took out 2 coffees and a bag of fruit kolaches from the bakery she liked in town, then placed the envelope between us. Wade's handwriting tilted across the front. For Mara. When she is ready to stop carrying it alone, my throat tightened. You had this? I found it in his desk after he died. He told me once, before the cancer got bad, that if he could not get you to listen in person, he had written it down. Why didn't you send it? Because he said, when you were ready. And because I was a coward too, in my own quieter way. She looked at her hands. I thought if I pushed, you would vanish completely. I did vanish completely. Not completely. You still answered when I asked you to come. That hurt more than accusation. I touched the envelope but did not open it. Lorna watched me. Wade believed you? He did not know the story. He knew men. I laughed softly despite myself. He used to say the most dangerous coward was the one with enough medals to convince himself he was brave, Lorna said. When your name came up after Kandahar, he got very quiet. He made calls. People stopped returning them. I never knew. You would not let anyone close enough to tell you. That was true, and I hated it. She reached across the table and touched my wrist. I am not asking you to go tonight. Good. I am asking whether staying home will feel like peace or surrender. I looked at the envelope, then at the metal box still on the counter from the night before. Then at my silent phone, lighting up again and again with people asking for pieces of me they had stepped over when I was whole enough to be boring. After Aunt Lorna left, I opened the event page on my laptop. The Kandahar Legacy Award, presented to General Preston Hale for courageous leadership during Operation Iron Lantern. Courageous leadership. The phrase did not make me explode. It made something inside me go still. No, I said. Not loud, not dramatic, just final. The Austin Veterans Memorial Center was the kind of building designed to make patriotism look expensive. Polished wood, stone columns, chandeliers shaped like inverted bells, framed flags behind glass, donor names etched in brass, men in formal jackets with ribbon racks and lapel pins, women in dark dresses carrying clutch purses and careful smiles, local politicians drifting between tables, defense contractors laughing softly near the bar, reporters adjusting cameras, a live stream set up near the stage, red light blinking. I arrived in a simple dark dress with sleeves long enough to cover most of the scars on my arm. I wore no medals because I had none to wear, and because even if I had, I would not have given Hale the satisfaction of seeing me arrive decorated for his funeral. Elias waited near the entrance. He looked me over once, not assessing my appearance, but my readiness. "You armed this kioscos?" he asked. "With arthritis and bad intentions." His mouth twitched. "Good. Those usually clear security. Humor, small and dry, passed between us like a canteen. Enough to keep moving." The room smelled of perfume, coffee, polished floors, and the faint metallic tang of catered chafing dishes. Conversations dipped when people noticed Elias. Some recognized him. Fewer recognized me. A few eyes passed over my face and returned, uncertain. Memory is strange. Some people had heard the name Hades, but never expected it to belong to a middle-aged woman in plain heels who looked like she wanted to be near an exit. Then I saw Hale. He stood near the stage surrounded by admirers. 76 years old, silver hair, tailored suit, American flag pin, smile practiced to the millimeter. He held a glass of water in one hand and rested the other lightly on the arm of a younger officer who was laughing at whatever he had just said. People leaned toward him. That is power, not volume, but gravity. A donor said, "General, you must be proud tonight." Hale smiled, proud of the men and women who served, always. Then he saw me. His face froze, only for a second. People like Hale do not survive by losing control in public. But I saw it. The old fear. Not guilt. Fear. A reporter beside him asked, "General, are you all right?" Hale's smile returned, thinner now. "Just saw a ghost." I was close enough to hear. I stepped into the light. "You should have made sure I was one." The officer at his side stopped laughing. Hale stared at me for a beat too long. "Mara Whitaker." "Preston Hale. You look well. You look decorated." Elias made a sound that could almost have been a cough. Hale's eyes flicked to him. "Elias Granger, I heard you were in Texas. I heard you were being honored for Kandahar. We all suffer surprises." Hale's smile remained, but his eyes hardened. He excused himself from the donor circle and guided us with a small motion toward a quieter corner near a display case of folded flags. "This is not the place," he said, voice low, "to reopen old wounds." I looked around the room. "You invited donors to clap for one." His jaw tightened. "You always had a gift for dramatics." "No, you always had a gift for paperwork." Elias stood slightly behind me, close enough to intervene, far enough to let me own the ground. Hale noticed. Men like him always notice alignment. He lowered his voice further. "Careful, Mara. Memory is unreliable after trauma." "Funny. Yours got very reliable once it needed to protect you." He exhaled slowly through his nose. "People here respect me. If you make a scene, they will not see courage. They will see a damaged woman who never healed." There it was. Not rage, not threat with teeth bared. Something worse. The old weapon wrapped in concern. "I know exactly what damaged women look like, Preston," I said. "They usually survive men who speak softly while holding knives." His smile thinned. "Go home." I did. "You followed me there 20 years ago." The program began before he could answer. A bell chimed. People moved toward their tables. Hale looked toward the stage, then back at me. "Do not embarrass yourself," he said. I almost laughed. "I spent 20 years carrying your shame. I am not afraid of embarrassment." He left us standing by the flags. The award ceremony unfolded with the polished rhythm of money and rehearsal. The host was a retired colonel with a radio voice and a talent for making every sentence sound engraved. He spoke of sacrifice, service, difficult decisions, the fog of war, the burden of command. He introduced Hale as a patriot, a leader, a man whose courage during Operation Iron Lantern had saved lives and shaped a generation of military doctrine. People applauded. I remained seated. Elias remained seated too. Hale mounted the stage to a standing ovation. The plaque waited on a small table beside the podium, heavy crystal catching chandelier light. The live stream camera's red light glowed. Hale began beautifully. That was the terrible thing. He had always known how to sound like the man people needed him to be. War, he said, asks questions no peaceful room can fully understand. Heads nodded. It asks whether we can lead under uncertainty, whether we can honor the fallen without turning pain into politics, whether we can make impossible decisions and carry them with humility. I watched his hands, steady on the podium, no tremor. He spoke of brotherhood, duty, sacrifice, leadership under pressure. He named men who died and let his voice catch at the exact places where donors expected humanity. He honored families. He honored service. He honored, above all, the version of himself he had created and fed for 20 years. Then his gaze found me near the back. Something changed. Of course, he said. War does not only wound bodies, it wounds memory. It wounds judgment. It creates stories people need in order to survive what they have done. The room shifted. Slightly. Enough. Elias's hand tightened around his water glass. Hale continued. During Iron Lantern, difficult decisions had to be made. Some personnel struggled to accept command reality. Some later built myths around reckless choices. A woman at the next table glanced at me, then a man, then another. I will not name anyone tonight, Hale said, naming me with every pause. But I will say this. Heroism is not disobedience. Trauma is not truth. And personal guilt should never be allowed to rewrite military history. There are rooms that become battlefields without anyone standing. This was one of them. Every eye that turned toward me became part of the old machine. Damaged woman, reckless pilot, unstable veteran, mythmaker. I felt the familiar shame rise, hot and poisonous. Not because I believed him, but because lies repeated in public can make the body remember being powerless. For 1 second, I almost left. Then Elias stood. His chair scraped back so sharply that the room jumped. He slammed his palm on the table. Silverware rattled. I was there. Hale's face changed just enough. Sit down, Elias. I sat down for 20 years, Elias said. I am done. The host moved toward the microphone, uncertain. Hale lifted one hand to stop him, calculating. Elias pointed toward me. That woman flew into a sandstorm after you ordered aircraft away from men who were still alive. The room erupted in whispers. Hale's voice sharpened. That is false. You abandoned them. Mr. Granger is emotional, Hale said to the room, recovering quickly. He is a respected veteran, but time and trauma distort events. Convenient how trauma only distorts memories that threaten you, Elias said. Hale looked at me, and I knew what he would do before he did it. He had done it before. He would not fight the facts first. He would poison the witness. Ms. Whitaker, he said, voice heavy with regret he did not feel, was investigated after Iron Lantern for reckless conduct and instability. That is not rumor. That is record. I have sympathy for what she endured, but sympathy cannot become history. The words hit their mark. People love records because records feel cleaner than people. I felt the room deciding whether to pity me or fear me. I gripped the edge of the table. Then I heard the wheelchair. It came from the front left side of the room. The soft mechanical turn, the lock of brakes, the scrape of a man shifting his weight. A broad-shouldered man with close-cropped hair and a formal jacket pushed himself partly upright from his chair. His left leg was there, his right was not. His face was older, fuller, marked by pain and life, but the eyes were the same. I knew him before my mind allowed it. No, I whispered. He looked at me and smiled with tears in his eyes. Yes, ma'am. The room fell silent. Owen Callahan steadied himself with one hand on the table. She saved my life. My knees almost went. For 20 years, I had carried his dog tag like proof of my failure. For 20 years, I had watched him disappear into sand. For 20 years, I had heard myself scream for a man I believed I left behind. You got me out, Owen said. I could not speak. Hale tried to interrupt. Mr. Callahan? No, Owen said, voice rough but strong. You said enough. He turned to the room. I was on that ramp. I heard command call it off. I heard men begging for extraction. Then I heard her voice say, Hades inbound. Every man on that ground knew what it meant. Another veteran stood, older now, wearing a ranger pin. Paul Sutter, he said. We had live status when the withdrawal order came. Command knew we were still alive. Then another man. James Del Rio, medic attached after extraction. Whitaker helped load wounded herself. I treated the man she pulled in. A woman stood near the aisle, hands shaking around a small purse. She was in her 70s, with white hair and the kind of grief that never fully leaves the face. Ruth Callahan, she said. My son Aaron died 3 months after Kandahar from complications. Before he passed, he told me there was a woman who came back when everyone else left. He told me her name was Hades. I closed my eyes. The young voice on the radio. Tell my mom I tried. Hale's hand gripped the podium. Then Captain Elise Monroe stood. I had not seen her in 20 years. At 58, she still had the straight posture of a communications officer, but her face carried the cost of silence. She held a folder against her chest like it might burn through her blouse. I signed the revised report because I was afraid, she said. I was 26. I was told my career would be over. I was told I would be blamed for comms failure if I refused. Hale's voice cut across the room. You are lying! Elise shook her head. No, I am done lying. She opened the folder. The original radio transcript. Timestamps, Hale's withdrawal order, ground team live status, Whitaker's unauthorized inbound call, the later edited timeline. The host had gone pale. The live stream camera remained on. No one seemed to know whether stopping it would look worse than letting it continue. Elias said, Play it. The host whispered something to the technician. The technician looked at the board members. One of them nodded, either from courage or panic. Static filled the room. For a moment, I was back inside the storm. Then a young voice came through the speakers. We're still alive. Please. We have wounded. Several people gasped. Hale's voice followed, younger but unmistakable. All air assets withdraw. More static. Then my voice. Hades inbound. No one moved. I heard my own breath in the recording. Heard Dana reading numbers beneath me. Heard the storm scratch at the signal. Heard a man on the ground say, Hades is coming. The audio ended. The crystal plaque on the table beside Hale looked suddenly grotesque. I stood. Not because I planned to, because my body had finished being seated. You called it leadership, I said. My voice was quiet, but the microphone near the technician caught enough that the room heard. They called it abandonment. I called it 20 years of silence. Before I could say more, the ballroom doors opened at the back. Nolan Price stepped in, breathless, hair wind-blown, shirt untucked, face stripped of every joke he had ever used as armor. He held his phone in one hand. He had driven from Waco after watching the live stream. He arrived just in time to see the truth break open. Nolan did not come forward at first. He stood by the back wall, seeing the room the way a guilty man sees a church, not as shelter, but as witness. Later, he told me he had replayed the barbecue video in his truck before leaving Waco. He had watched himself point the phone at me, watched the family laugh, watched my face remain still while my hand trembled. He had watched Elias in the background turn pale. He had watched himself become the kind of man he usually claimed to hate. At the event center, he saw the radio transcript projected on a screen. He saw veterans standing at their tables. He saw Owen Callahan half upright from his wheelchair. He saw Hale alone on stage, one hand gripping the podium like a man holding on to the last piece of land before floodwater took it. He saw me standing near the back, not powerful in the simple way people imagine power, but still standing. He heard people whisper the name, Hades. Hale grabbed the microphone. War creates confusion, he said. Logs can be misunderstood. Emotional testimony is not evidence. Elise did not sit down. She removed another document from the folder. The declassified file confirms it. A board member took it from her with shaking hands. The host read over his shoulder. The room waited. I knew that waiting. It is the moment before a verdict, before impact, before someone decides whether truth is inconvenient enough to ignore. The board member looked up. This file indicates the withdrawal order was issued before the ground element was assessed as non-viable. Hale said, "That is an incomplete interpretation." It also confirms Whitaker's aircraft sustained battle damage during an unauthorized rescue resulting in the extraction of 31 personnel. Murmurs spread. Elise said, "Read the recommendation." The board member hesitated. Elias walked forward and took the page. No one stopped him. He read aloud, voice steady. Chief Warrant Officer Mara Whitaker displayed extraordinary courage under impossible conditions, knowingly risking aircraft and life to extract wounded personnel under hostile fire and catastrophic weather. The room was silent. He lifted the second page. Recommendation denied due to reckless disregard for command structure and unresolved questions regarding judgment under stress. Signed, Preston Hale. Owen laughed once, bitter and bright. "I call it the reason I got to see my daughter born." Ruth Callahan's voice followed. "I call it the reason my son did not die believing America forgot him. That did what evidence alone could not. Evidence informs. Grief convicts." More witnesses rose after the first 5, not all of them with dramatic revelations, but each carrying a small stone from the wall Hale had built. A former maintenance sergeant said he inspected my aircraft after the mission and filed a damage report that proved we had taken fire while inbound, not after some reckless deviation on the return. A nurse who had been 24 at the field hospital said she remembered me asking about a blonde Marine with a destroyed leg until a doctor sedated me because I would not stop trying to stand. A retired chaplain admitted that he had repeated concerns about my stability to Graham because he believed he was helping my husband prepare for a difficult recovery. When he said that, his voice broke. He had spent 2 decades thinking he had offered pastoral care. Now he understood he had been used as a delivery system for poison. The room did not become righteous all at once. That would be another comforting lie. Some people looked angry because they had been deceived. Some looked frightened because they had applauded the deception on camera. Some looked calculating because their names, donations, endorsements, and photographs were attached to Hale's legacy. Truth does not enter a room and make everyone noble. It reveals who was waiting for permission to become honest and who was only waiting to see which side would cost less. A young reporter near the wall raised her hand even though no one had opened the floor. "General Hale," she called, "did you or your office contact Ms. Whitaker's family after the mission?" Hale's eyes snapped toward her. "This is not a press conference." "No," she said, surprisingly steady. "It is a live stream." A nervous laugh moved through the room and died quickly. I looked at her then. She could not have been more than 27. Young enough to believe that questions still worked if asked clearly. Maybe they sometimes do. Hale said, "I will not dignify accusations based on grief and confusion." Graham was not in that room, but his absence suddenly had weight. I imagined him watching somewhere, seeing the shape of what he had believed. I wondered if he remembered the chaplain's call, the retired officer who invited him to coffee, the careful phrases about supporting a troubled spouse. Hale had not needed to order Graham to leave me. He only needed to make staying feel like denial. Elias stepped near the stage and looked at the board chair. Ask him whether he blocked the medal because she endangered command structure or because honoring her would have exposed his order. Hale said, "You are out of line." Owen answered before Elias could. "No, sir. You moved the line. We're just putting it back." That sentence traveled through the room like a match. I saw men straighten. I saw Ruth lift her chin. I saw Elise press the folder against her heart and exhale as if she had been holding breath since 2003. For the first time that night, Hale looked not merely challenged, but surrounded by the truth he had scattered. The host approached me with the microphone like a man offering a weapon he did not know how to hold. "Ms. Whitaker, would you like to say something?" The whole room expected a speech. I could feel it. They wanted heroism now because heroism is easier than complicity. They wanted me to rise clean from the ashes and make them feel that witnessing truth was the same as repairing it. I took the microphone anyway. "I was scared that night," I said. That startled them. I was angry. I was exhausted. I made choices I still question. I disobeyed an order. I left my seat. I put my crew at risk, and some people did not come home whole. Some did not come home at all. Owen lowered his head. "So if you came here looking for a clean hero, I am sorry. War does not make those." No one spoke. I looked at Hale. But I know the difference between fear and betrayal. Fear is human. Betrayal is what you did after. His face changed then. Not collapse. Men like Hale collapse privately, if ever. But the mask cracked. A tiny fracture at the mouth, a hollowing around the eyes. The look of a man who understands that applause has left the room before his body has. A board member stepped onto the stage. She was a woman in a black suit, maybe 60, with the expression of someone realizing her foundation had been used as a laundering service for another man's legacy. She quietly removed the crystal plaque from the table. No one shouted. No one threw anything. No arresting officers stormed in. The restraint made it worse. Hale had spent his life surrounded by ceremony. Now ceremony withdrew itself from him. "This event," the board chair said, voice trembling but clear, "is concluded pending review." A donor stood and left. Then another. Politicians who had smiled beside Hale an hour earlier found urgent reasons to look at their phones. Younger officers avoided his eyes. Veterans remained standing, some crying openly, some staring with the blank fury of men who had heard too many lies wrapped in flags. Hale stood alone on the stage. That was when Nolan walked forward. I saw him and stiffened. Even then, even with Hale exposed, my body remembered the phone in my face. Nolan stopped several feet away. He looked smaller than he had in Aunt Lorna's yard. Not physically, spiritually. Shame had reduced him to the size he should have been before he opened his mouth. He turned toward the room. "I need to say something." No one invited him. He said it anyway, which might have been the first brave thing I had ever seen him do. "Last night," he said, voice rough, "I recorded my cousin while I made fun of her. I called her princess. I thought I was being funny." The word hit the room differently now. He looked at me. I was not funny. I was cruel. I did not rescue him. That matters. Women are too often trained to soften the apologies men make so the men do not have to stand alone in discomfort. I let him stand. "I thought you were quiet because you had nothing to say," Nolan continued. "Now I know you were quiet because none of us had earned the right to hear it." Aunt Lorna had called him during his drive, he told me later. She had told him not to demand forgiveness, not to make his apology another performance, not to turn my pain into the stage on which he became a better man. For once, Nolan listened. "I am sorry, Mara," he said. "I know that does not fix it." "No," I said, "it does not." He nodded, accepting the hit. "I know." That was all. It was not forgiveness. It was not reconciliation. It was a first brick laid correctly after years of kicking down walls. Ruth Callahan approached me when the room began to empty. Up close, I could see the photograph, and her hand had been folded and unfolded so many times. The creases were soft as cloth. "My son Aaron," she said. She handed it to me. The photograph showed a young man in uniform, grinning in sunlight, one arm around a woman who must have been his sister. His eyes were bright, stubborn, alive. I could not breathe. "He wrote to me after Kandahar," Ruth said. "He said if he died, I should know there was a woman who came back when everyone else had left." The voice returned. "Tell my mom I tried." "He did," I whispered. Ruth's face broke, but she smiled through it. "I know. You brought him home alive long enough for him to tell me himself. I held the photograph with both hands because one was not steady enough. Outside the event center later, the Austin night was warm and damp. Traffic hissed beyond the parking lot. Reporters waited near the entrance, hungry now that heroism had become scandal. Elias guided me toward a side exit without asking. We stood under a live oak while he called a friend to move his car. "I'm sorry," he said. I kept looking at the photograph. "You said that already." "I will probably say it again. You were not the one who signed the lie." "No." His voice was quiet. "But I benefited from your silence. Men like me got to be called survivors. You got called unstable." I looked at him then. The honesty in his face did not ask to be rewarded. "I do not know what to do with that," I said. "Neither do I." "That is probably the first useful thing anyone has said tonight." He nodded. Nolan came out a few minutes later and stopped when he saw us. He wanted to say more. I could see it crowding his mouth. Then his phone rang. Aunt Lorna, probably. He answered, listened, and looked at me with wet eyes. Whatever she said, it worked. He put the phone away and did not approach. For 20 years, I thought justice would feel like fire. But when the truth finally came out, it felt more like standing in ashes and realizing I was still alive. By morning, the story had spread through military circles with the speed of old guilt finding new technology. Clips from the fundraiser were everywhere. Hale's speech, Elias standing, Owen saying, "She saved my life," the audio of the radio log, my voice saying Hades inbound, the board chair removing the plaque. Nolan's apology even made it into one clip, though most people online cared more about the general falling than the cousin learning shame. My phone filled until it stopped feeling like a phone and started feeling like weather. Old pilots, former medics, veterans I had not seen in years, family members, unknown numbers, messages from men who had been there, men who knew someone there, men who had heard the story in barracks and field hospitals and bars where names become myths because official records refuse to hold them. We always knew something was wrong. "You got a raw deal." I should have said something. "I heard about Hades from my brother." "You brought my friend home. You deserved better." The hardest messages were not the hateful ones. There were a few, of course. People who love false heroes hate the women who remove their masks. The hardest messages were the gentle ones that admitted what silence had cost. "We never believed the official story." I read that sentence again and again until it lost meaning and gained pain. They never believed it. Some of them. Many of them, maybe. And still I had lived alone with it for 20 years. Doubt without action is not rescue. Suspicion without courage still leaves a person buried. Aunt Lorna came over near noon. She did not bring kolaches this time. She brought Wade's letter again because I had left it unopened on the kitchen table when we drove to Austin. "I think Reddy came," she said. I took the envelope. My hands were steadier than I expected when I opened it. Wade's handwriting filled 3 pages. He had written slowly. You could see where illness had made his hand shake. He began without drama, because Wade had never trusted drama when truth would do. "Mara, if you are reading this, either I finally cornered you long enough to hand it over, or Lorna found it after I ran out of time. I hope it is the first one. Knowing me, it is probably the second." I laughed once and covered my mouth. He wrote that he knew men like Hale. He had served under them, drunk coffee with them, watched them survive mistakes by attaching those mistakes to someone with less rank. He wrote that after Kandahar, he made calls, not official calls, old man calls, he called them. Quiet questions to people who still owed him enough respect to be uncomfortable. He wrote that every person who answered too carefully made him more certain I had been framed. "I never believed you ran," he wrote. "I never believed you were reckless in the way they meant. You were always careful with other people's lives, even when you were careless with your own heart." That line made me stop. Aunt Lorna sat across from me, crying without making a sound. Wade wrote that he was sorry the family let silence grow around me. Sorry they mistook distance for arrogance. Sorry he had not driven to Temple and sat on my porch until I either spoke to him or threw a tomato at his head. I would have deserved the tomato, he wrote, but I hope I would have stayed. The final paragraph was shorter. You do not have to prove anything to be loved. You do not have to tell the story for it to be true. But if the day comes when someone tries to bury you again, remember this. Graves are for the dead, and you, girl, are still breathing. I folded the letter carefully. For years, I had thought no one in my family wondered if I was innocent. Not enough to ask, not enough to fight. Wade had wondered. Wade had tried. It did not fix the years, but healing is not always repair. Sometimes it is discovering that one of the stones you carried was never yours. Nolan came the next day with peach turnovers from a bakery in Gatesville, which was funny because Nolan had never voluntarily entered a bakery in his life unless a woman sent him. He stood on my porch holding the box like an offering to a wild animal. I owe you more than an apology, Bob, he said, but I do not know where else to start. I looked at the box. You start with turnovers? Aunt Lorna said cobbler would be too on the nose. Despite myself, I opened the door wider. He sat at my kitchen table and did not joke for nearly 10 minutes. That alone may have been a medical event. He stared at his hands. I thought you were exaggerating, he said finally. I never said anything to exaggerate. I know. I mean, I thought the quiet was an act, like you wanted everyone to think you were mysterious. That would require caring what everyone thought. He nodded. Yeah, he took a breath. I repeated things about you being unstable, about Graham leaving because he could not handle your drama. I do not even remember who I heard it from. I just liked having something to say. That was Nolan. Not evil in the grand way, careless in the daily way. The kind of cruelty people excuse because it does not draw blood where they can see. You made me smaller because it made you feel bigger, I said. He flinched, then nodded. Yes. No defense, no but. No, I was drunk, though he had been. No, I did not mean it, though maybe he had not meant all of it. Just, yes. That mattered. I cannot forgive you today, I said. I know. I might not tomorrow. I know that too. But you can come to Lorna's Sunday dinner if she invites you. And if you point a phone at me again, I will feed it to you. He laughed once, then realized he was allowed to. Fair. When he left, the house did not feel fixed. It felt less sealed. Graham called that evening. His name on the screen did not hurt the way it once had. That surprised me. Old pain can become furniture. You stop seeing it until someone moves it. I let it ring nearly to voicemail before answering. Mara, he said. Graham? The silence between us had aged too. I saw the footage, he said. Then I read what I could find of the file. I said nothing. I believed the report. I know, he exhaled shakily. Someone contacted me back then. From Hale's circle, I guess. He said he was trying to help families understand. He told me you had caused deaths, that you were refusing treatment, that you were hiding behind trauma. The kitchen around me remained still. The tomatoes outside glowed red in the last light. I thought I was leaving because the war changed you, Graham said. Now I know I left because I believed a lie about you. The war did change me, I said. The lie just made sure I had to survive it alone. He began to cry then, quietly. I had imagined that sound for years, usually with satisfaction. When it came, I felt no victory, only distance. I am sorry, he said. I needed you then. I know. I do not need you now. Another silence. But I am glad you know, I said. He cried harder. I let him. Then I said goodbye and hung up before either of us could mistake truth for invitation. 3 days later, Preston Hale called. I nearly deleted the voicemail without listening. But his voice, older and smaller through the speaker, said, "There are things you still do not know." That was how men like him kept doors open. a little bait shaped like necessity. I met him anyway, not because I owed him a conversation, but because I was done letting him decide where the story ended. The diner sat outside Georgetown, near a highway exit with a gas station, a feed store, and a billboard advertising legal help for truck accidents. Ordinary life filled the place. Waitresses refilling coffee, old men in baseball caps discussing rain that had not come, a toddler dropping fries one by one onto the floor while his mother pretended not to see. Country music low overhead, sunlight striping the tables through plastic blinds. Hale sat in a back booth. Without stage lights and admirers, he looked smaller. Still well-dressed, still composed, but diminished, like a statue removed from its pedestal and revealed to be hollow plaster. I sat across from him. He began wrong. "You have had your moment," he said. "Do not destroy what is left of my family." I leaned back. "There he is?" His eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "The man who thinks consequences are something other people owe him protection from." He looked toward the window. "I have grandchildren," he said. "So do some of the men you left. I made a decision in impossible conditions." "No, you made one in fear. Then you spent 20 years pretending fear was strategy." His face tightened. For a moment, I thought he would stand and leave. Instead, something in him sagged. "I panicked," he said. The word sat between us, ugly and insufficient. "The storm came in faster than expected," he continued. "We were losing visibility. Reports were conflicting. I believed sending aircraft in would multiply casualties." "Then why alter the timeline?" He closed his eyes. "There it was. The wall. When you came back," he said, "everything changed." I waited. If you had failed, the withdrawal order would have looked prudent. Tragic, but prudent. If everyone had died, people would have said I preserved remaining assets under catastrophic conditions. But I came back. His eyes opened. They were wet, though I did not mistake tears for repentance. "You came back," he said, "with survivors, with damage, with witnesses. Your courage made my caution look like cowardice." "It was cowardice." His mouth twisted. "Yes." The waitress came by with coffee. Neither of us spoke until she left. Hale stared into his cup. "I did not ruin you because you failed, Mara." I already knew, but hearing it mattered. "I ruined you because you came back." The diner sounds sharpened around us. Forks on plates, ice machine dropping cubes, a man laughing at the counter. Life continuing, rude and holy. Hale wiped one hand over his face. "I do not expect forgiveness." "Good." He flinched. "Forgiveness is not a medal you get to pin on yourself because you finally got tired of carrying shame." His shoulders lowered. "What do you want?" he asked. A sworn statement correcting the record. Names, dates, orders, altered report, pressure on witnesses, medal denial, contact with my husband, all of it. "It will destroy what remains of me." "No," I said. "It will introduce you to what remains of you." He stared at me for a long time. Then he nodded. Not because he was noble, because the exits had closed, because the story no longer belonged to his signature alone, because cowardice, when cornered, sometimes imitates conscience closely enough to be useful. I left before finishing my coffee. For years, I thought I needed him to suffer, but what I needed was simpler and harder. I needed him to stop being the author of my life. In the days after Hale signed the sworn statement, official correction moved slowly because institutions apologize at the speed of cold syrup. First came acknowledgement that new information had been received. Then a review board announced it would examine discrepancies in the Iron Lantern record. Then a deputy assistant secretary, whose name I had never heard, issued a statement full of passive verbs. Errors were made, documentation was incomplete, conclusions may have been improperly influenced. I read it at my kitchen table and laughed until I cried, because even vindication apparently needed to avoid naming the hand that held the knife. Elias was angrier than I was. He wanted names in headlines, hearings, stripped honors, formal apologies with dates and signatures. Owen wanted that too, though he wanted it with a calmer face and a lawyer copied on every email. Elise gave another statement, this one official, and sent me a short message afterward. I know this does not undo it. Thank you for letting me finally stand where I should have stood then. I stared at that message for a long time before replying. I did not write, I forgive you. I wrote, keep standing. It was the truest thing I could give. The medal question returned, awkward and shining. Someone suggested the old recommendation could be revived. Someone else mentioned a ceremony. A colonel with a careful voice asked whether I would be willing to travel to Washington if the review board approved recognition. I told him I would think about it, which was polite language for I would rather chew glass than become a prop in a room full of men congratulating themselves for noticing I had been wronged. Maybe one day I would feel differently. Maybe not. Valor delayed 20 years is not the same medal. It arrives heavier, carrying everyone who should have spoken sooner. Owen visited me before I went to the support group. He drove himself in a modified truck and parked crookedly in my driveway, then cursed at the angle like the truck had personally insulted him. I watched from the porch as he maneuvered his chair down the ramp with practiced irritation. You always greet guests by spying through curtains? He called. Only the suspicious ones. Good. I brought pie. That makes me less suspicious. It depends on the pie. Pecan, borderline trustworthy. He laughed, and the sound did something strange to my chest. For years, Owen had been a ghost made of guilt. Seeing him annoyed by gravel, carrying grocery store pie, and wearing a t-shirt that said, I do all my own stunts, was almost too ordinary to bear. Inside, he placed the pie on the counter and looked around my kitchen without pretending not to. Quiet place. Quiet was the point. Did it work? I considered lying. Sometimes. He nodded. Yeah, mine didn't either. We sat at the table. I gave him the dog tag. His face changed when he saw it. He closed his fingers around the metal slowly. They told me it got lost, he said. I thought you did. I know. The words were soft, and they undid me more effectively than sympathy. I looked away, but tears came anyway. Owen waited. When I could breathe again, he said, I need you to hear this from me. You did not leave me. I was under two guys and half a blanket, screaming like an idiot. Luis kept me alive. Ben sat on me during takeoff because I kept trying to get up, even though my leg was mostly theoretical. You asked about me until they sedated you. I know because a nurse told me. So, whatever room you've been visiting for 20 years, the one where I disappear in the sand, you can stop going there. I was not there. I saw you fall. I did fall. Then some stubborn bastard dragged me the rest of the way. I lifted off. And because you did, I lived long enough to become a pain in everyone's ass. I laughed through tears. He smiled. My daughter is 19, he said. Her name is Mara. I covered my mouth. She hates when I tell people because she says it sounds like I named her after trauma. I tell her no. I named her after the reason trauma didn't get the final word. There are forms of grace that hurt entering the body. That was one of them. Before he left, Owen asked if I planned to keep hiding. I am not hiding, I said automatically. He looked around my quiet kitchen, at the metal box still on a side shelf, at the single chair angled toward the door. Sure. Subtle. I lost a leg. Not my manners. You absolutely lost your manners. He grinned. Come to the group Elias mentioned. Not because you owe us, because you have spent 20 years debriefing with ghosts. Try the living. We interrupt less. That was not true. As I would learn, veterans interrupt constantly, but they do it with better timing than ghosts. 2 weeks after the fundraiser, Elias invited me to a veteran support meeting in Killeen. I almost refused before he finished the sentence. Support group had always sounded to me like a room where people perform damage politely under fluorescent lights while drinking bad coffee. As it turned out, that description was accurate. It was also not the insult I thought it was. The meeting took place in the basement of a community center between a tax office and a church gym. Folding chairs in a circle, bad coffee in an aluminum urn, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Veterans of different ages sat with paper cups, crossed arms, guarded faces. Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. Places that had changed names on maps, but not in bodies. No medals, no stage, no donors, no microphones except the ones people carried in their throats and were afraid to turn on. Elias introduced me simply. This is Mara, not Hades, not Hero, not the woman from the video, just Mara. I appreciated that more than any award. For most of the meeting, I listened. A young man near the wall talked about driving too fast at night because stillness made him feel hunted. An older woman described keeping every receipt because losing paperwork made her panic. A Marine with tattoos up both arms said he hated when people thanked him for service while standing too close. People nodded, not dramatically, not with pity, with recognition. When it was my turn, I almost passed. Then I thought of Nolan's phone, Ruth's photograph, Wade's letter, Graham's call, Owen alive in his wheelchair, and the young voice on the radio asking someone to tell his mother he tried. I used to think silence protected me, I said. The room listened. And maybe it did at first. There are times when silence is a splint. It holds you together until you can move without breaking. But after a while, mine started protecting the lie more than it protected me. No one interrupted. That alone felt like mercy. People think the hardest part of war is combat, I continued. Sometimes it is. But for some of us, the hardest part is coming home to people who need you to be normal before you know how to be human again. A woman across the circle wiped her eyes. I disappeared for 20 years because disappearing felt safer than being misunderstood. Then someone said my old call sign in a room full of people, and I learned that buried things can still breathe. The young man near the wall looked at me. He had not spoken much. His hoodie sleeves were pulled over his hands. Do people ever really come back from it? He asked. Everyone knew what he meant. Not war exactly. Not one event. The dark. The place inside that keeps happening after it is over. I thought about lying. People lie to the young out of kindness and call it hope. Not completely, I said. His face fell a little, but enough. He looked up. Enough to call someone back. Enough to sit at a table again. Enough to answer the phone sometimes. Enough to stop letting the worst thing become your name. Elias looked down at his hands. A man with a Vietnam cap asked, "Why Hades?" I had been asked that many times since the footage spread. Online comments had guessed everything, from demon pilot to angel of death. People like names to mean one thing. I took a breath. People thought it meant death, I said. Fear, violence, maybe because that made a better story, but that was never it. The room was quiet. They called me Hades because when men were trapped in hell, I came back for them. My voice almost broke on the next sentence, but did not. And for a long time, I did not understand that one day I would have to come back for myself. No one applauded. Thank God. Applause would have ruined it. They just sat with me in the truth, which is harder and kinder. What changed most after the truth came out was not the way strangers saw me. Strangers are easy. They make symbols because symbols do not ask anything of them. Online, I became whatever people needed for the length of a comment. Badass pilot, betrayed veteran, proof that generals lie, proof that women are stronger than men, proof that the military protects its own, proof that the military eats its own. They argued beneath clips of my worst memories as if the comment section were a courtroom and my life were evidence in cases they had been waiting to prosecute. I learned quickly not to read too much. Praise can be another kind of trespass when it reaches for you with dirty hands. The harder change happened in ordinary places. At the grocery store, a man in a Vietnam cap stopped me by the tomatoes and said, "Welcome home," then walked away before I had to answer. At the post office, the clerk who had known me for years but never asked anything suddenly treated my silence with more care, as if she had discovered it was not emptiness but weather. My neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, left a casserole on my porch with a note that said, "No need to talk, eat." That note was so perfect, I kept it on the refrigerator for a month. Family changed more slowly. Some relatives overcorrected, which was almost worse than mockery. They spoke to me in soft voices, the way people speak in hospital rooms, and apologized for things they had not done, because apologizing generally felt easier than understanding specifically. One cousin sent a long message about always admiring my strength, even though she had once told people I made gatherings uncomfortable. I did not answer for 2 days. Then I wrote back. Strength is not the same as convenience. She sent a heart emoji. I decided that was enough interaction for the week. Nolan, to his credit, tried without demanding applause for trying. He stopped drinking at family gatherings, or at least stopped drinking enough to become everyone else's problem. He deleted the video from his phone, but did not pretend deleting it erased what he had done. At Lorna's insistence, he wrote letters to the teenagers who had laughed that night, not to shame them, but to explain how easy it is to become cruel when the loudest person in the room gives permission. One of them, my nephew Caleb, sent me a message afterward. "I laughed because everyone did. I'm sorry." It was the simplest apology I received, and one of the best. I also began opening the metal box more often. Not every day. I was not trying to punish myself. But I stopped treating it like a bomb. I took out the burned patch and placed it in a drawer instead of under blankets. I cleaned the cracked flight badge with a soft cloth. I unfolded the mission map and laid it flat under books for a week until the creases loosened. Objects are patient witnesses. They do not forgive or accuse. They simply wait for you to become able to look. One afternoon, I drove to a small framing shop in Temple with Ruth's photograph of Aaron, Wade's last paragraph, and a copy of the radio transcript line where my voice said, "Hades inbound." The young woman behind the counter asked if I wanted a military-style display with flags and brass plates. I almost said yes, because it would have been easier to let tradition decide. Instead, I chose plain dark wood. No flags, no brass. Just 3 pieces of paper and one photograph held carefully. When I picked it up a week later, I sat in the truck and cried before I could start the engine. I hung it in the hallway where no visitor would see it unless I invited them deeper into the house. That felt right. Some truths do not belong in public rooms. Some belong where you pass them in the morning on your way to make coffee, where they can become part of life instead of an interruption to it. The first time I invited someone over on purpose, it was Aunt Lorna, Elias, Owen, and Nolan. That combination would have seemed absurd a year earlier. Lorna brought chicken salad. Elias brought coffee so strong it could have stripped paint. Owen brought his daughter Mara, who stood in my kitchen with the curious discomfort of a teenager meeting the woman attached to her name. Nolan brought paper plates and managed not to make a joke about being trusted with sharp objects. We ate on the back porch while the sun went down. Nobody asked me to tell the story. That was why I eventually told a little of it. Not the worst parts, not all at once, just enough. Dana's terrible jokes, Ben's margin note calling the inquiry horseshit, Luis humming under fire, Owen trying to get up with one leg and no sense. The younger Mara Callahan laughed at that, and Owen looked offended in exactly the way fathers look when their daughters enjoy someone else's version of them. At one point, Elias raised his coffee cup, not like a toast, More like an acknowledgement. To the ones who got carried, he said. Owen lifted his soda. And the stubborn fools who carried us. Aunt Lorna touched Wade's letter through the frame I had brought outside to show her. Nolan looked at me, then away, giving me the dignity of not being watched while my eyes filled. That was when I understood repair was not a grand emotional scene. Sometimes repair was 5 people on a porch, letting silence be comfortable for once. A month later, I went back to Aunt Lorna's for Sunday dinner. Not a barbecue, not a birthday, just chicken, green beans, rolls, and too many desserts because Lorna believed grief and celebration both required butter. The family was awkward. Of course they were. Healing does not make people smooth. Beth hugged me too long. Nolan carried chairs without being asked and said less in 3 hours than he usually said before appetizers. A nephew asked me about helicopters, then turned red and apologized. I told him one question was allowed if it was not stupid. He thought carefully and asked how it felt to fly in a storm. I told him the truth, loud. Aunt Lorna had framed Wade's letter, not the whole thing, just the last lines placed near the family photographs in the hallway. Graves are for the dead, and you, girl, are still breathing. I stood in front of it for a while. No one interrupted. At dinner, nobody treated me like a joke. Nobody treated me like glass either, which was almost as important. Nolan passed me the rolls. I took one. That was all. Sometimes, repair begins with bread moving across a table without performance. Afterward, I walked out to the yard where Elias had dropped his glass. The patio boards had been swept clean weeks ago, but I imagined one tiny shard still there between the planks, catching light. A small broken thing no one noticed. Proof that something had shattered and the world had not ended. Aunt Lorna came beside me. You okay? She asked. No. She nodded. But I am here, I said. She smiled. That still counts for something. Some people survive by getting loud. Some survive by disappearing. I disappeared for 20 years because I thought peace meant never being seen. But peace built on silence is fragile. It breaks the moment someone says the truth out loud. People used to think Hades was the name of a woman who brought death. They were wrong. Hades was the woman who flew into hell because someone was still alive inside it. And maybe that is what all healing is. Not forgetting the fire. Not pretending the smoke did not scar your lungs. Not forgiving every person who warmed their hands over what burned you. Just turning around, walking back into the dark, and bringing out whoever is still breathing. Even if the person you save is yourself. Sometimes the strongest people are not the ones who come back untouched. Sometimes they are the ones who walk out of hell carrying someone else, then spend the rest of their lives learning how to carry themselves.